President Obama has won the support of more leading Republicans for an attack on Syria's armed forces. Several of his new supporters are usually some of his fiercest critics. And the BBC has just seen the text of a new resolution from the influential Foreign Affairs Committee of the US Senate. Now, it would authorize limited and tailored military action within a 60-day period. It rules out, though, any combat on the ground by US armed forces.
Politicians in the US are considering a draft resolution which says, quote, "The President is authorized to use the armed forces of the United States as he determines to be necessary and appropriate in a limited and tailored manner against legitimate military targets in Syria." It also says, quote, "The authority granted does not authorize the use of the United States armed forces on the ground in Syria for the purpose of combat operations." And any air campaign would have a set window. The resolution would expire, quote, 60 days after its enactment, except that the President may extend for a single period of 30 days.
Obama met with 16 Republican and Democratic leaders at the White House. He wanted to convince them to approve military strikes against the regime of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. He told them an attack would hinder Assad's ability to use chemical weapons.
I think it is appropriate that we act deliberately, but I also think everybody recognizes the urgency here and that we're going to have to move relatively quickly.
The biggest coup of the personal lobbying effort yet, the most powerful Republican in Congress is on board.
I'm going to support the President's call for action. I believe that my colleagues should support this call for action. We have enemies around the world that need to understand that we're not going to tolerate this type of behavior.
It's not a given that politicians on his own side will back a military strike, despite support from the House Democratic leader.
Members have to decide, do they want to ignore the fact that this humanitarian disaster took place or not?
We cannot afford to have another war!
Ardent anti-war Democrats want no intervention at all, a view shared with gusto by these protesters who chose the first public committee hearing to voice their anger.
Despite rallying support from across the political spectrum in Washington, lengthy conflicts in both Iraq and Afghanistan appear very much in the US public's mind. Opinion polls put their support for military action in Syria at just 9%.
It's also interesting to note that UN investigation, those samples, by the way, did just arrive today for testing at The Hague, but that investigation was only to determine whether or not chemical weapons were used. Those investigators with the UN were not there to determine who used them, so the Obama administration's case is that at the end of the day, even if the UN does come out and say, okay, it looks like a chemical was used, which the US already claims did happen, the answer of who used them is still going to be an open one from the UN perspective, and the US has the evidence.
At a press conference with the German president, French President François Hollande said both countries shared the same indignation and hope that there can be a political solution for Syria, but said that France would not go it alone. If the decision of Congress isn't positive, France won't act alone, but it will assume its responsibilities by supporting the democratic opposition in Syria in a way that allows a response to be given. Hollande called on Europe to unite in response to the Syria crisis ahead of a meeting of EU foreign ministers at the weekend.
Yes, Syrian ally Russia appears to be changing its tone. Russian President Vladimir Putin now says Moscow could support a UN-sanctioned military strike on Syria if there is indeed proof the Assad regime used poison gas on its own people. And that is coming from an interview Mr. Putin did with the Associated Press and Russia's state channel 1 television. Putin also said Russia has frozen future shipments of air defense missile systems to Syria.